I am so grateful to be able to be on with you folks today. Staff, members of the ABCD board, other folks who are joining us. It is a celebration, like History Month. I just have to reflect on where I've been. I'm not Black, I'm white, born in Charlestown, and have seen a lot. I actually was in the physical presence of Dr. King and his folks in the 60s. I've watched over the years what happened when we had to fight, work, do so much to be able to today be able to say we've made some progress. Jim Crow, all the held back people. That's our history. The real history has been that there are many people, African-American slaves, others who had been slaves, have done so much over these 100 years. Individuals, many in Boston, took leadership in their own community. ABCD was formed in the 60s. We were formed to help the city actually get over being bulldozed, knocking down communities. We're able to be formed. In the back of me is Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the War on Poverty in 1964. We also celebrated the first awakening by Congress of the United States over 100 years to provide real legislation for voting, civil rights, for all the other things that had been barriers. We celebrated that. We've gone through the 60s, 70s, 80s. I won't characterize it any more than we're human beings. We're trying our best and have tried our best to make change. ABCD's purpose in life fundamentally is to get communities engaged, to be able to participate in the broad economy, to bring people who've been left out in. I think we've done as much as we can and more on that. We're one of 950 ABCDs across the country. So I celebrate today that we've made another year, another advancement. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're in a pandemic. And in the pandemic, we saw something that just rolled away. A man being suffocated under a car. It's horrible. How does that work out? We then were tested. Think about that and everything else that's going on. I am so glad that I've been part of ABCD for all 50-something years. As a parent, hits that. I have felt that, but on a journey these years, inside with all the people who are struggling. And our job was to try to be best we could to help, but to set in place things that were not there before. We did collectively. Head Start, legal services for the poor. So many different things were started to encourage people to participate, to get their children, and a heck of a journey. And we've learned a lot. I know Dr. Crocker is going to come on. She's going to be wonderful. And I want to thank our consultant, help, Dr. Tron. I want to thank Sharon for her leadership, and Ron and Chris and all the other panelists, because I believe what we're doing is taking it very serious, that our mission is inclusion. Our mission is to get people to be able to interrelate with each other, be able to take children, get them to another point in their lives. I think we've made progress. But that's not for me to say. That's for somebody who is African American, Black, to say. My observation is we have made progress. There's a long ways to go. And I think that what's happening in the world today epitomizes the human race. We can't get along. We're invading other countries. But fundamentally under that, we're good people on this planet. And with the eventuality that we'll reach the point where there'll be no need to talk about somebody's color, creed. We'll just hopefully be able to work together as a human race, as a species, to help us all get through the next generation and generation after that, and to take the fear out of lives of people who've had it, make people stronger. It's very, very, and I'll finish up with saying, I'm stepping off this ladder at some point soon. Sharon's going to step up to the ladder and get a lot of you folks. But I just want to say, I am totally encouraged by looking at the ABCD staff, by looking at the board, by looking at all the people we help every day, to pull us together into where we're going as in the next years. There'll be a lot of challenges, but I think your strength pulling together will overcome and will make lives better for everybody. And that's all I've ever wanted to do. So have a great session. Donna, how are you doing? James, I'm talking to my bosses, the board of directors are my bosses. Make sure I can see them. But thank you. You've got a full agenda. Please take advantage of that. And I do also celebrate with the Asians. Year of the Tiger. I celebrate with Puerto Ricans. I was their chief guru one year. I celebrate with all of the Caribbean. We are collectively a group that can move, make things happen with all kinds of us doing the right thing. So thank you very much. Have a good day. I'll be watching.
John already said hello to James, one of our vice chairs. I'm going to actually, because I saw him jump on, Sean Daughtry. Sean Daughtry is the chair of the ABCD board, and he is on as well. So I'm going to give him a chance to just say hello to us all at the beginning of this Black History Month event. John, are you there still?
I am, and thank you, Sharon. Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to say hello as I popped in for the Black History Month event hosted by ABCD. So I would just ask that everyone please engage, support ABCD, and continue to contribute to supporting all of our citizens throughout this city through all the excellent programming that ABCD provides. So thank you again, John. Thank you, Sharon. I'm looking forward to a great program. Bye-bye all.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean, so much for joining us. I also saw Thelma Burns. We're so glad, as John said, as Sean said, we're so glad that you could join us this afternoon as we close out Black History Month, right? I'm sure that you've done a lot of events and reflection, and we're gonna add to that with a bit of reflection and vision on how we're thinking about the issues of racial equity in the work that we do every day at ABCD. And if we think about these past 2 years since the pandemic began and the sort of cataclysmic death of George Floyd that kind of moved all of us in the world, so much has changed in our lives. Of course, look at us now in a Zoom. We generally celebrate in person a Black History Month event at the Burns Building. And so many things have changed, but so much remains the same in terms of the racial inequity. And as Sean said, the need to continue to stress and emphasize that Black history is American history. It is a vital history to the development of this country and the establishment of this country. so much has gone on in terms of, rising hate crimes and opposition to criminal justice and even insurrections at the Capitol. So we have so much more work to do. And I think that taking this time out to reflect on that, but also do the work that we do at ABCD. And I think John mentioned, we're fortunate at ABCD because we are as diverse as the communities we serve. We're diverse. We've been historically diverse and one of the most diverse nonprofits in the city, given our size, given our work. If you look to your left, to your right, or the screens, you'll see an incredible group of folks who come from so many different backgrounds. And as John also said, we have a mission that aligns with our fight for racial equality and racial equity. So we're delighted today to inspire you with a wonderful expert speaker in this work, Dr. Carolyn Crockett, who you'll hear more about. We're delighted to share the work that's been going on and to encourage more of you to become involved in the work that we're doing here and even throughout the city. I'm going to now turn it over to Ron Marlowe so he can introduce our guest speaker who's joined us today. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be off camera momentarily as I introduce our keynote speaker and as I go extemporaneous in some moments in reading in others to ensure that I do justice to our keynote speaker. Just this weekend, I was rereading Chain of Change by Mel King, one of Boston's leading lights and historical figures. But, as John spoke and as he handed off to Sharon, and as Sean spoke and as Miss Thelma Burns was recognized, ABCD should really look to place itself within the context of that chain of change. We have a rich history as evidenced by members of our board. Miss Thelma Burns was a leading light in the fight to bring educational opportunities to, at the time, Black children, but all children in the city of Boston in the late 60s and early 70s when the Boston public school system was failing those children. And so I want to make sure that everyone understands that you are, in whatever ways, small or large, links within that chain of change. And it is my pleasure to get ready to introduce you to Dr. Carolyn Crockett, but allow me to give you just a bit of her extensive and impressive bio. Dr. Carolyn Crockett holds a PhD from the American Studies program at Yale University, a Master of Science in Geography from the London School of Economics, and a Master of Arts in Religion from Yale Divinity School. Dr. Crockett's research focuses on large-scale land use, changes in 20th century American cities, and examines the social and geographic implications of structural poverty and race. Dr. Crockett's book, People Before Highways, Boston Activists, Urban Planners, and a New Movement for City Making, investigated the 1960 era's grassroots movement to halt urban extension of the U.S. interstate highway system and the geographic and political changes in Boston that resulted. In 2019, this book was named one of the 10 best books of the decade by the Boston Public Library Association of Librarians. Dr. Crockett recently completed her service as the City of Boston's first Chief of Equity, a cabinet-level position Mayor Walsh established to embed equity and racial justice into all city planning, operations, and work moving forward. She holds a faculty appointment as Professor of Urban History, Public Policy, and Planning in MIT's Department of Urban Studies and Planning. Dr. Crockett's career mission is to continue to work at the nexus of education, economic development policy, and urban revitalization. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend, my colleague, an inspirational leader within the city of Boston and beyond, and a link in that chain of change, Dr. Carolyn Crockett. Dr. Crockett, the floor is yours.
Ron, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's so great to be here to see some familiar faces and some new faces. John, I appreciated very much your reflections earlier on. You really set the tone for us so nicely. And Sharon, thank you for opening up the room and letting everyone, even a stranger like me, feel connected here. So it's great to be in a space where people already know the work, get the work, and are carrying the chain of change forward, as Ron has suggested. I have to be honest and say that I am, so inspired by all the work that you all do every day to support and to protect families, elders, and young people who are the lifeblood of our city's very soul. Your work is often thankless and unseen, but the impact is real. I can speak to it for myself, for my family, for my neighbors, and just really want to take the opportunity to salute you. So thank you for the chance to be with you on this, the final day of Black History. It feels fitting because it seems like after a month, even a short month of reflection, this is the opportunity to say, what are we going to do? What is the action? What is the motion? What is the way that we continue to do what we do? And how can we understand that so much of Black history, as I understand it even, has been about a history of resistance, and having the power and the courage to say yes to what matters most by saying no. So I'll just share a few reflections with you over the next few minutes. But what I'm most excited about is the opportunity to have some questions and to really engage. And I wish that I was with all of you. We could be together instead of just sort of sitting in my office at MIT, but I'm not far away from you. And I'm definitely feeling the vibe and the spirit of this room. So my reflections again are really just on, how do we think about this history of saying no, this history of agitation as a way of saying yes to what we know is so important. I grew up in Boston and Dorchester, and despite that very glowing bio that Ron read, sometimes when you hear your bio or things about you, you feel like you're almost at your own funeral or something. And so I think when you hear my bio, what you hear is someone who's had a lot of school, probably too much school. And so I'm happy to say that I finished school, and I've been able to pay off those loans, because you can hear that too. So thank you, to God be the glory. But I hope you also hear in that bio the story of someone who has been really committed to the city of Boston, connected to the city from the beginning. I grew up in Boston, in Dorchester. I live in Common Square. I live about 4 streets over from where I was born. And I'm grateful to ABCD and a whole web of programs that gave me and my own family a safety net over and over. I remember actually going to the ABCD office, like so many people, from my very first job application over on, I think, Claiborne Street. Is it a 110 Claiborne? Okay, yes. Off of by Park Street. I remember going over there and feeling so excited. I think I had to be 14 or 15. And someone had said, if you're looking for a job, you go over there. And that feeling of excitement and purpose to know that I was going to go and find out about a job, the very first one. And I remember going and talking to the staff person and having that paperwork and walking home and saying, I'm going to figure out all these things. I need to have all these documents, and this is going to give me an opportunity. And that feeling is undescribable. And as a young person, I just knew how important it was to feel like there was something that I could do for myself, that I could earn some money for myself, for my family. And so you all do that over and over and over again. And many years later, when I was able to start a nonprofit working with young people myself, I remembered that experience, wanted to create job opportunities for them. And then so many of those young people themselves, through a program called My Town, were able to get ABCD jobs and opportunities. So it's amazing how, again, the work that you all do every day, it just continues to multiply itself, even in my own story. So thank you again. So you are part of a movement, a big movement of people here and around the world who have said no to poverty, who have said no to landlessness, who have said no to disempowerment. And you have moved families and entire populations toward power, toward fullness, toward participation, and even so much of the charge that ABCD was founded with, which was a charge through the Office of Economic Opportunity to have maximum feasible participation, and that was really calling people not to be left, not to be erased, not to be invisible, but to be a clear part of building up their communities themselves and to step into fullness. And so that is an important legacy to not only remember, but to think about what else is it that we can do today to extend that pledge, that promise, that mission. You know, for me, I think so much of my own path has been about trying to understand what else can we do. As someone who was born after the civil rights movement, someone who was born in the 70s, very much forged in the fire of the school desegregation or busing, as you call it, such a time of fragmentation in our city, such a time when people were saying there is more that we can have here, that we can build it for ourselves, understanding how organizations like ABCD set the infrastructure, the framework for action, but also a way to raise up leadership, to sustain leaders over time and across generations. And so even as we think about what else is the work to do, what is it that our past has taught us? Our past has certainly taught us about the importance of continuity, the importance of understanding that when folks came together to say no to urban renewal, to say no to knocking down buildings, but to say yes to building up people in their lives, that was a call to action, not just in the 60s, not just in the 70s, but to today. Even as we sit in this moment of a triple pandemic that is continuing to call us to further action, to further commitment, we think about COVID, even as we move from pandemic to endemic. We hope that we can really figure out what it is that we learned about equity in this moment. What did the devastation of a pandemic that brought so much grief and death to Black and Brown communities, what is it that we have learned from COVID that we can take with us forward so that we do not find ourselves here again? What did we learn from the murder of George Floyd and the ongoing racial reckoning that is demanding that we understand not just the excesses of police brutality, but we understand the ways that policy and the infrastructures around us, the policy infrastructure around us leads to loss of life, which is supposedly in our interest at the hands of law enforcement. What is it that this moment also of economic devastation, COVID has shown us this third area of crisis, which is economic devastation that has led to the highest number of unemployment in our country's history since the Depression. What is it that we can do not only to get people back to work, but to rebuild a sense of future? And so this triple pandemic that we are still in is another moment for us to understand what is it that we are saying yes to by understanding what it is that we must say no to. When I started my research on the anti-highway movement that Ron had mentioned to you, some of you may know that I wrote this book a few years ago called People Before Highways. And the book is a story that many of you all know, the story of people coming together in Boston, in Cambridge, and across the region to say no to the extension of I-95. So we all know that I-95 is this road that goes in pretty much a continuous stretch from Maine to Florida. So if you want to get in across to the eastern seaboard, you just get yourself on I-95 and hope that the traffic gods will be merciful and you will actually get to your destination. But that is what I-95 is supposed to do. It is a continuous loop of 1,900 miles along the East Coast, except for two places. One place is a small break in Maine around Portland, and there's still ongoing conversation in Portland about what to do with the I-95 freeway. But the other break is right here in Boston. And the reason why I-95 does not go into downtown is because people said no to a road. And unlike being able to take this road into Philadelphia or New York or Baltimore or any of these main cities, Boston folks and their allies said no to it. And again, a story that many of us know, if you've been on the Orange Line, if you've been on the Southwest Corridor Park, walked around along those bike trails or gardens, you know that this is not just an amazing 14.7-mile park. It's not just an incredible example of mass transit in the Orange Line, but the features are an incredible sort of testament, like a monument to citizen action, to people saying no to a road and saying yes to a future that included them, that allowed them to have more space in the city, that allowed them to have a much more hands-on articulation of community control, of community destiny and self-determination. And so right here in our midst, we have an incredible story. For me, I was really interested in telling this story because it is a story that for many people is known. It's something that we're very proud of as people who are committed to organizing, as people who are committed to progressive causes. And as many of you know, a lot of times the fights that we wage are losing battles. You don't fight for things because you think you're going to win often. And when I interviewed people who were involved in the anti-highway movement, folks like Chuck Turner, folks like Tunny Lee, folks like Gloria Fox, folks like Fred Salvucci, and I asked them, what is it that made you want to fight this thing? And they said, we felt like we had to do it. We didn't think we could win. We didn't think there was any possibility, but we absolutely felt like we had to say no because of what we had learned about from urban renewal, from the West End clearance, from Chinatown's clearance. All of those things taught us never again. And so it really got people to be engaged and committed to this fight. And then I was also struck by this moment, a sort of 1960s moment. You think of the 60s and you think of, you may think of the civil rights movement, you may think of the student movement, the anti-war movement, all of these things sort of bubbling at the same time. And what's amazing is how there were so many people who were engaged in these fights who knew each other, who talked to each other, who strategized together. And so much of that came together for this fight against the highway. An important part of that were the fights waged by Black nationalists, militant philosophers, and the very active Boston chapter of the Black Panther Party. Many folks don't know how active those folks were, but it's incredible to understand how the assassination of Dr. King on April 4th, 1968 was a moment of devastation, not just because of the loss of an important leader, but because for a whole generation of movement makers and organizers, they felt like their commitment to nonviolent civil disobedience was done. Their commitment to racial integration was done. That now there had to be a new kind of movement making, a movement that was about direct action, a movement that was about moving from the rights of colored people to a conversation around Black is beautiful and the politics that would come with that. For us in Boston, we benefit directly from this type of political change and philosophy because many Black nationalists became involved with the anti-highway fight and were very radical in their pronouncement that not only should the highway be moved, but it should be stopped. A lot of this was led by, again, folks who were coming out of the civil rights movement who were saying there's a different way to do this. We don't just want to be allowed to go to school. We don't want to just be allowed to use water fountains, but we want to be able to have control of how the space where we live is used and to determine what goes here. And so from a period of 1969, 1970, 1971, an incredibly busy period of activism and organizing is going on that has directly to do with the shape of Jamaica Plain, of Roxbury, of parts of Rosendale, of the South End, Hyde Park, neighbors really coming together and saying there is a different way, and we have the ability and we have the right to determine that for ourselves. This notion of community control and self-determination, again, are very crucial and precious ideas rooted in Black nationalist politics. So we can be proud to know that this legacy sort of is not only enshrined in the landscape that we cross through every day, but again, was an opportunity to say no to a road and to say yes to a set of possibilities that we all enjoy today and are still unfolding. And so even as we look back again at this incredible sort of many stories that are unfolding before us, we still are in a moment of asking ourselves, what are we willing to say no to so that we can make the possibility of yes apparent? It is not lost on me that we are just marking the 10-year anniversary of Trayvon Martin's murder that demanded another no. A no, not just again only to police brutality, but also a no to the set of values that would put more value on property than life. This weekend, many of us collectively said no to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine and stood in solidarity to understanding the importance of the rule of law and sovereignty and the protection of our brothers and sisters elsewhere. And so this long arc of history is not always easy to know where it ends or if it will turn out in our favor. But the call to action, the call of history that is demanding that we're very clear and intentional about the things that we reject so that we can make more space for the things that we need, is a clear clarion call for now. When I was tapped as the City of Boston's first chief of equity in 2020, it was a shock. It was a shocking moment. I remember being at home. I was at my kitchen sink washing dishes. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and the phone rings, and it's the former Mayor Marty Walsh. And then I said, "How did you get my phone number? I hadn't even been in City Hall in quite some time. I'm just washing dishes." And he talked to me quite directly about what he saw as the issues before him as mayor and the issues before our city. And he said that there was no greater issue to understand in advance than equity. And I asked him very clearly, what do you mean by that? How do you understand what equity is? Even with my knowledge of history, my knowledge of policy, I know enough to know that equity is used so frequently and in so many different places that it's very hard to know what we're talking about. And if we don't know what we're talking about, we certainly can't know what we're doing. And I'll share this, that I said, for me, equity is about a corrective action. It is not equality. It is not treating everyone the same. It is recognizing the ways that policies and histories and the acts of structures, government, corporate structures, and others have treated different groups differently. And so the mistake is to treat everyone the same, knowing that the structures that determine our lives, whether it's the health system, or economic system, or political system, has not treated us all equally. That is fact. That is something we can trace to even the very core of the US Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. Equity is about recognizing very different histories and getting us to the place where we can all have the same outcomes in terms of health, in terms of wellness, in terms of prosperity. And that is the call for us to step into that with a sense of boldness, a sense of purpose, and a sense of determination that delivers us into this new kind of reality that we've been fighting for, but one that we know we can call out because so many folks have showed us the way. So again, I just come to you in a spirit of solidarity, in the spirit of gratitude, in the spirit of someone who is with you trying to walk it out. I teach in an urban planning department where there are young minds in here who are really committed to figuring out what it is that they can, in fact, say no to so they can move to yes. And I would love any words of advice or encouragement from any of you that you would wish for me to pass on to this next generation of architects and city planners and policymakers who are hungry for change because they have been forged in a fiery moment. And you all who are on the front lines have so much wisdom and information and inspiration to share. And I would love to receive any and all of that. So I will pause here and just welcome the conversation and look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you so much.
One of the downsides of Zoom, of course, is that unless everyone puts up the reaction of the clapping hand, which appears to be a raised hand, but you have to use a little imagination, a speaker cannot receive her applause. And so on behalf of my colleagues at ABCD, know that you are getting a standing ovation, and we very much appreciate your words. We do have a couple of questions for you that we hope you'll be able to entertain. And the first question is this: given your knowledge and understanding of ABCD, what would your charge be to ABCD in this moment of intense struggle to achieve equity? And what do you think ABCD's role should be in local and national advocacy movements?
Thank you for the question. I think that the ABCD, you all deserve a refresh of your own history, because although you're in it every day, I don't know if you fully realize all of the impact, the history, the story, the bigness of you. And it deserves to be called out in a real way. And even as ABCD over the years has moved even more fully into a service model, that there's much to be said around your work in advocacy and organizing, which is really your root. And I wonder if there's a way to kind of refresh yourselves on that story, because like me, I mean, when John was talking about Head Start, my mom's sister was one of the first kids in Head Start in Boston, tells that story. And so at this point, you have multiple generations of people who have come through ABCD's programming, either trying to get a first job like me, or going to Head Start like my auntie, or even being serviced through fuel assistance or through the food pantry. And it seems like you may not realize that you have all these sort of seeds and almost a very powerful family or comrade of folks, and how to kind of wake up the history and wake up that kind of electric base that you have within you, which I think is bigger than even the word client. The word client itself may obscure the powerfulness of this cadre that you have been nurturing for generations. And it seems like there is an opportunity here, perhaps to rekindle that, to reflect on that as an opportunity for further action.
No, well, thank you, Dr. Crockett. And we do have a second question, and then, we'll try to give you whatever time back we can. This one's a little provocative, but we don't believe in censoring at ABCD. Dr. Crockett, could you offer your thoughts on student loan forgiveness?
Oh, please, yes.
On reparations?
Yes.
And on an idea of a perhaps back to Africa movement on the part of disenfranchised African Americans?
Ron, that would be one question.
You can answer any part that you'd like. And of course, Dr. Crockett has agreed to actually respond in writing to any questions we're not able to get to, and we will share them fully with the staff. And so let's just stick with student loan forgiveness on this one, because the other two are such big topics.
Well, I'll take a stab here. Student loan forgiveness, please make schools free. Whatever Senator Warren is trying to do for us to just try to get this message out, I mean, y'all's work with the urban college and all that is so important, to have just really important ways for people to get the education that they need. It is a crime that education is as expensive as it is. I say that as someone obviously sitting in a wealthy sort of elite school that charges people lots of money to come here. I've been through a lot of schools that cost a lot of money. Like I said, I just finished paying those things back. Insane. And we know that at this moment, if you do not have a college education, or if you don't have some kind of exposure to high performing industries like tech, it's going to be nearly impossible for your family to be able to sustain themselves in North America or elsewhere. And so the question is, how can we get people to the opportunities that we know that they need, not only to have shared prosperity, but also this critical piece about closing the racial wealth gap that we can talk about all day. I was just on a call, I was just in a meeting with the Boston Fed earlier today on this very point of revisiting the Color of Wealth report and really firing up our engines on how we understand closing the racial wealth gap. And the cost of education has got to be a clear part of that, a part of that issue that has to be addressed. Your point on reparations, we have got to have a real conversation about reparations in this country, about what that looks like and what that means. The injuries that have been that have affected so many populations, and particularly folks who are the descendants of formerly enslaved people in this country, like myself. I come from formerly enslaved people who were enslaved in South Carolina. After emancipation, my family moved to West Virginia and worked in the coal mines and had a very difficult time. And so these stories are not unique. However, they are not acknowledged. We need to understand what that means for the wealth of the nation, and how that has also contributed to generational wealth extraction and deprivation. So there's got to be a much more robust discussion about reparations. I'm pleased to say that when I was in the role of Chief of Equity, Mayor Walsh and I convened 2 tables of mayors quietly, but we did on the very topic of reparations, including mayors from Evanston, Illinois, from Asheville, North Carolina, and other places where they were actively engaged in reparations, not only study, but a conversation about what that meant in terms of wealth redistribution to African-American families and their descendants.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Crockett, let me say thank you on behalf of my colleagues again for your time, for your grace, for your willingness to engage the questions. You are always welcome back at ABCD. Dr. Crockett has agreed to hang out for a little while. She does have a 3:30 appointment because she is as interested as many of you are in the equity work that has gone on starting back in July of 2020 as we close, let's just call it phase 1 of this work, and move on to phase 2 and beyond. And so, Dr. Crockett, again, thank you. I will turn the floor over to my colleague, Chris Sieber, who will lead us from here. Chris?
Okay. Thank you, Ron. I thought I saw Josh Young out here too. Is Josh there?
Yes, our colleague Josh is here.
Yes, they're all here.
Matter of fact, that Josh's question was most of question number 1.
Okay.
Well,
Always good to be in the space with you, Josh.
Thank you again, Dr. Crockett. And what we're going to talk about next is really what Dr. Crockett has mentioned as frameworks for action, and also frameworks for raising up emerging leaders. Because, at ABCD over the past 18 months or so, there have been 4 committees working on figuring out how to put the nuts and bolts into the overall racial equity mission that ABCD has articulated. And they've done tremendous work. And they also need you, because we want to broaden the discussion. We want to engage people. We want to make sure that there's access to this conversation across the agency. And what that means is basically, for this Black History Month, we're going to ask you to respond by sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your energy in helping ABCD move forward on these areas. There have been 4 committees working. One is on advocacy and community investment. Basically, how can ABCD connect with the other movements that are going on in the city and the nation? service delivery, how can we make sure that our services delivered through ABCD are equitable and accessible? 3, training. How can we make sure that everyone who works at ABCD has access to a shared basis of understanding about racial equity? And 4, organizational policy. How can we make sure that the basic policies and procedures that we may not interrogate normally are really working in the direction of equity? So we have 4 hardworking groups that have done a lot of good stuff, and they're interested in your opinions and your participation. So we're going to go through them one by one, rather briefly, but they're all ready for you to get involved. And at the end of this little segment, we're going to have some information about how you can get in touch and how you can get plugged in to this work. So we might want to start with the advocacy group, and I know Josh and Aisha have been spearheading this group, and they've gotten a lot done. So folks, do you want to take this one away?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. First, I'd like to thank the work of the Advocacy and Community Coordination Committee members, Ryan Brennan, Roxanne Reddington-Wild, Alexia Lane Lohman, Tanoy Burton, Marge Lombard, Stephanie Marcelin, and Margaret Roberts. As you can see, the committee's mission is to ensure that ABCD is engaged with national and local efforts to build racial equity, as well as working closely with local partners whose missions are focused on racial equity. Our criteria that we developed in working with partners is that they, 1, already have a significant presence, 2, that they have demonstrated work around racial equity, 3, that they're a quality program, and 4, that they would benefit from ABCD resources. Ways that we've already started to work on are in supporting other organizations is we are looking to increase staff involvement on relevant boards, 2, offer mentorship, 3, make meeting space available to organizations, 4, contribute wraparound services, and 5, offer technical assistance. And an intermediate step that we're working on currently is we're developing working relationships with partners. We hope to arrange a series of discussions on targeted issues and coordinate legislative and/or institutional issues for joint advocacy. And then finally, a long-term goal is we look to establish criteria for undertaking an incubator role for one of our local partner programs, provide information to community leaders about ABCD's historic role, as Dr. Crockett had mentioned, with fledgling programs. And some examples of those are Mira Coalition, as well as the Boston Evening Academy. And then finally, we hope to maintain a scan horizon to ensure that we can work with social entrepreneurs in the local community. So we welcome your involvement and hope that you'll join our committee.
Thank you very much, Josh. This is a committee that's got a good head of steam up. They've got some great ideas, and we just need more hands to help get the work done. So I think our next committee is the service committee. And this is a very interesting one, because what we're asking ourselves through this committee is, how do we make sure that the services ABCD delivers are reaching the people most in need and being accessible to diverse populations. So I think, Jessica A., did you want to speak a few words about this?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Jessica Aguilera Steiner from Health Services. I first wanted to mention the group of folks who have been thinking service delivery from a racial equity lens through with me. And I'm just a spokesperson, but by no means solely represent this group. We have been joined by Darren Seto, Jessica Rosario, Josh Young, Kathy Tobin, Roger Oser, and Ron Marlowe. So our group is really charged with thinking about how we provide services, to whom, and what the outcomes of those services are. So we're really looking at new ways to reach the populations who need these services the most, beyond whom we are serving, and looking at who else is in need. We're looking at making sure that our services are culturally and linguistically accessible, and that we are not creating barriers to access unintentionally. And we're also looking at our outcomes. How do we evaluate the impact of our programs to make sure that the impact to all folks is equitable? And we're doing this through, or our planning has taken place through lots of different ideas and activities. Here are a couple, but by no means all of them. So looking at our service delivery areas and who we're serving in different programs, and have the areas changed in their demographics? A lot of times we think we're serving a certain group of people, but we're not always sure that we are. We are wanting to pay attention to outreach, how we do outreach, and to what areas and what groups. In a little bit more detail on program outcomes, we would, all programs have outcomes that we are required by our funders or others to take a look at, but are we looking at them from a racial perspective and an ethnic perspective? And overall, what sort of considerations do we need to make changes in our service delivery design to reduce some of the disparities if we find them? And there are many ways that you could be involved in this work. We really, really encourage anyone who's interested to think about taking a deeper dive into learning more about the communities that we serve, especially as they change. Sharing about how the different communities that you serve use ABCD services. Learn more about program outcomes and how to evaluate them, and being a part of thinking through how our programs may need to flex or change or adapt to serve different communities better. So please join us.
The next committee up on our list is the training committee. And this sometimes, this is where a lot of it starts, because at ABCD, we have what, 850 staff members, and many of them are really interested in learning more about racial equity issues and how they handle those issues in the workplace, how they do better at supporting their workers. And, you know, we want to make sure that we have a robust and continuous training program. So I think Mathilde was going to speak a little bit about this group.
Thank you, Chris. Our group, part of our group was Carla Richards, Billy Ray, Lee Fenner, Makia, and Monique. And together we came up with some ways to make sure that we do have staff that understand the basic concepts, the implicit bias, microaggressions, cultural awareness, and emotional intelligence, and how do we translate that to staff? We also wanted to focus on the cultural competence, serving the diverse populations, and creating a safe space where we can have all these conversations. So part of what we are working towards is creating a racial equity training for existing staff, managers, and onboarding staff, so that when our folks are working, they are equipped with the tools. We also want to create opportunities for informal support and mentorship, partnering junior staff with more senior staff or senior members of the community to make sure that we're creating a path so that we can develop our more junior staff of color. Also going in depth on different topics and providing more specific trainings that are identified. And also creating some opportunities for us to learn ourselves, so that it's not just something that the agency's asking you to do, but giving you the tools so that you can know how to handle this on a day-to-day basis. So if you're interested in helping access training and supporting needs for your colleagues, becoming a leader and providing training and information to staff, helping to select, evaluate training opportunities, and being a part of the discussion on how training can be integrated in day-to-day work, the training committee would be a fit for you. So please join.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. The last of these 4 committees is one that might have the deepest impact over time, although it's certainly not easy to make that impact. And that is the program and the policy committee, which is tasked with looking at what's happening as a result of ABCD's policies about recruitment, hiring, purchasing, all those other administrative things that we do on a day-to-day basis that we don't necessarily always look at deeply. And I think Jessica R. was going to talk a little bit about this, if she'd be so kind.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present on the goals of the Organizational Policy Racial Equity Advisory Group. I want to thank our current members in the Human Resources Department for their openness as we aim to analyze ABCD policies and procedures. We have currently established a mission statement, which are, as you can see, to celebrate and utilize the diversity of our organization to promote equity, to continuously review ABCD administrative processes through the lens of racial equity, and to create tools for managers to further integrate equity into the administrative processes. We have divided the work into sections that include recruitment and hiring processes, compensations and promotions, policy reviews, and procurement of vendors. Some ideas and tasks that will help us start tackling some of our goals include, but are not limited to, reviewing ABCD's record of minority-owned vendor purchasing, analyzing recruitment criteria to identify any potential flaws, and to develop options for mentorship and trainings which could promote retention and advancement for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Other ideas have included creating tools to better showcase career ladders to current staff, and to have human resources review and compile diversity data, including consultant analysis of applicants, hires, promotions, and terminations. Like all of the other groups, we would love to get more members involved as we continue to tackle this work. If you would like to learn more about how to engage minority contractors and suppliers, how our policies could potentially impact the hiring of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and if you would like to help create mentorship and work supports for our current staff, please consider joining. Thank you.
as you can see, folks, this is not a celebratory occasion. It's an occasion where we're trying to get you to sign on for a little bit of the heavy lifting. But we really do need your participation. We want to make sure that these decisions on the part of the agency are not made by a few people, made by people across the whole spectrum of the agency. So, think about it. If something strikes your enthusiasm, if you can see the way to put your energy and your devotion to this cause into making concrete progress for ABCD, please send us an email. There's an email address on the screen, and we'll send it out also after this meeting. We are privileged to also have Dr. Kimberly Trung here to say hello. Dr. Trung has been working with us as a consultant on racial equity training. And she's worked with the committee and recently delivered our initial training session. She has a remarkable record as an academic, a researcher, and a trainer. Her background is at Harvard and MGH, and she is, somebody that has already given us a lot of guidance and knowledge. Dr. Trung, these are the folks that we're all going to be dealing with over the next 6 to 9 months.
Chris, thank you so much for the introduction. And I wanted to also share, even though I have a PhD, that I was the first in my family to graduate from high school and go on to college. And so growing up, my family has been on SNAP, WIC, AFDC, when it was called that, and TANF. And so my family is very familiar with the services that ABCD offers. And so my work has been on racism and racial trauma in higher education. That's what my PhD is in, focused on post-secondary education. And I've been consulting with various nonprofit organizations around racial equity issues. Within ABCD, as Chris mentioned, we did one workshop so far with managers. And I'm so glad that Matilda was talking about implicit bias and some of the work that you're doing in the training committee, because we had a 2-hour live workshop with asynchronous materials that people could go through that took about 90 minutes for them possibly to go through, where we defined racism, defined racial race. We talked about the racial equity approach within ABCD. We created awareness around implicit bias, as well as microaggressions and how to mitigate microaggressions in interactions. And right now we're getting feedback from folks about the workshop. We're gonna still have this workshop rolled out twice, 2 more times, to larger groups within ABCD. And from the feedback, we're also going to be developing another workshop based on what ABCD's needs are. And I'll get an opportunity to work with all of the different committee members within the racial equity working group to, so that I can get to know your work better and also help with providing any technical assistance that you might need. But I'm really excited to hear about all of the work that you're doing, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trung. We look forward to more work with you as well, and hopefully engaging many more folks, including those who are on this call, with that work.
I wanted to close by thanking everyone for joining us. I also saw Joyce Dennis, one of our other board members. So thank you, Joyce, for taking the time out of your day. Dr. Crockett, you just brought us back. You brought us back to, like John, the roots of ABCD. And I love the way you said that we are a powerful family and we need to inspire ourselves and with a refresh. And that's what I hope we're doing today. And with the work that we've been doing is not only thinking about what we do inside our house, but outside of our house. And thank you for your inspiring words and your reminder. I also loved that your words that racial equity is a corrective action. And I feel like ABCD is a corrective action. We are trying to correct some of that action of the past. And again, we are really pleased that you joined us and hope you continue to be with us on our journey and as we move forward. Thank you again, everyone, Dr. Trong, all of the folks that you heard from, Chris, Ron, Jessica, Mathilde. These folks need partners in you all at ABCD. I did want to mention, if people didn't notice, that the video, this event is being recorded. And so we're going to have it up on the page. Talk to everyone and anyone you know. We know that it's hard for all staff to get on a Zoom during the day. We're cognizant of that, particular Head Start staff who are with children every day. And it's hard for them to take a break or to take time out during this time. So it will be available by video. Please tell your colleagues who are not here just so they can hear this, be inspired, join in the effort. So thank you all for joining. And unless anyone else has anything else that they want to impart to us, we're going to let you all go. Thank you.